Muy buenos días amigos, aquí en la Ciudad de México. Estamos a punto de iniciar esta segunda audiencia pública del Congreso de los Estados Unidos que tendrá con funcionarios del Pentágono, donde se analizarán diversos puntos sobre la investigación que se viene realizando de los llamados objetos anómalos no identificados o UAPs. También otra manera de designarlos, que me parece que al final va a ser la que se va a quedar, son los objetos transmedios, objetos que pueden transitar desde el espacio exterior a la atmósfera terrestre al fondo del mar. Y esto lo vamos a ver en unos minutos más. Rubén Villatoro, ¿cómo estás?
¿Qué tal, Jaime? Buenos días y buenos días al público que nos acompaña en esta transmisión histórica, porque se escribe una página más muy importante en lo que ha sido todo este proceso de desclasificación que inició desde el 27 de diciembre del 2017 con aquel célebre reportaje del New York Times. ¿Cuánto se ha avanzado, Jaime? Muchísimo. Hay muchos obstáculos, hay mucha resistencia a aceptar que estamos siendo visitados, pero hay legisladores, hay gente dentro del gobierno norteamericano que está impulsando todo esto. Y una de esas personas es la senadora Kirsten Gillibrand, que tenemos que reconocer que está haciendo una labor extraordinaria motivando estas audiencias.
Sí, sin duda ella se ha convertido en el motor, en la persona que ha impulsado más tanto la creación de la oficina del AARO como pues en que se libere la información. Hoy va a estar ahí Sean Kirkpatrick, quien es el director de esta oficina, creada específicamente, creo que fue en el año 2021, con fondos que les dieron el Congreso para que investigaran el fenómeno, porque antes la situación era que no había fondos, Rubén.
Así es.
Y entonces ahora incluso le están reclamando ya al Pentágono. La senadora Kirsten Gillibrand tuvo un enfrentamiento con Austin Lloyd, quien es el secretario de la Defensa, porque no le están dando los fondos, ¿no? Y creo que ella está presionando para que haya más fondos y haya resultados en las investigaciones. Sean Kirkpatrick, no sé qué te parezca a ti, creo que es un hombre abierto, creo que es un hombre que está dispuesto a hablar más que los otros funcionarios del Pentágono que han venido obstruyendo toda esta apertura, ¿no? O sea, parecería que el Pentágono ya está dispuesto. No, no está dispuesto. Están dispuestos los congresistas, están dispuestos los pilotos de combate, están dispuestos los científicos, pero la parte dura del Pentágono, ellos no quieren que esto siga avanzando, Rubén.
Así es, y cómo olvidar que Sean Kirkpatrick precisamente llamó la atención de la opinión pública a nivel mundial apenas hace unos días, porque recordarás que en conjunto con A.B. Loeb escribieron un artículo donde exploran la posibilidad de que hasta en nuestro sistema solar estén llegando grandes naves nodrizas, de las cuales saldrían pequeños objetos que serían los que estarían arribando al planeta Tierra. Estamos hablando de un científico de alto nivel, de alto perfil, que está reconociendo esta posibilidad.
Los dos, pero también Kirkpatrick, tengo entendido que es un científico, por eso se le puso al frente de esta oficina, y los dos especularon, si usted quiere, la posibilidad de la existencia de una nave nodriza allá afuera, para tratar de explicar por qué hay tantas naves aquí, por qué hay tanta actividad. Pues alguien las tiene que traer, entonces, y eso llamó mucho la atención de los medios. Ahora, ¿qué vamos a tener en la audiencia de hoy? No se ha dicho, no hay una agenda, no se han planteado los puntos, solo sabemos, y no sabemos quién van a participar, sabemos que Kirsten Gillibrand, la senadora que ha impulsado más este tema, va a estar ahí, y también sabemos que Sean Kirkpatrick va a estar ahí. Otras personas no se ha informado, no se ha dicho nada, ha estado un poquito restringida la investigación y pues no ha habido muchas facilidades para saber más de lo que vamos a ver el día de hoy.
Así es, y bueno, tú ya mencionabas hace unos momentos la audiencia que hubo apenas hace unos días, el 28 de marzo, para ser concretos, donde la senadora Kirsten Gillibrand cuestionó al secretario de Defensa, que es parte del comité de AARO, y en un hecho insólito, yo lo considero así, Jaime, amigos del auditorio, lo que reclamaba Kirsten Gillibrand a estos hombres era ¿por qué no están pidiendo más dinero para que funcione en condiciones óptimas esta oficina? O sea, Qué curioso que sea la senadora, un funcionario quien les diga por qué no piden más dinero, cuando generalmente es al revés.
Mira,
son las oficinas las que solicitan presupuesto.
yo creo que este punto de que el Pentágono, los militares desde 1947, es decir, hace exactamente 76 años, ¿cuántos son? 53 y 23, pues sí, son 76 años desde que decidieron pues secuestrar la verdad, y ellos lo saben, y saben que han recuperado naves, saben que han desarrollado ingeniería inversa. Esa parece que va a ser uno de los temas de hoy. Posiblemente se le va a preguntar a Kirkpatrick si tiene conocimiento, si los Estados Unidos han recuperado naves y si ha investigado con retroingeniería la tecnología de las naves. Al menos se ha especulado que esta puede ser uno de los temas del día de hoy. Y esa es una de las partes que más le preocupa al Pentágono, porque si aceptan que está ahí arriba el fenómeno, pues no les hace ningún daño. Lo que sí les hace daño es que se sepa que desde el 47 tienen naves y tienen seres, y se burlaron del fenómeno, lo cerraron, acabaron con carreras, con vidas, con profesiones, y ahora resulta que 76 años después se sabe que sí era cierto, se sabe que han mentido, o se sabe que ocultaron mucha información. No lo sabe el pueblo de los Estados Unidos. ¿Cuáles serían las consecuencias de que esto se diera a conocer, Rubén?
Pues bueno, sería un cambio cultural revolucionario que generaría un gran movimiento a nivel mundial, porque la aceptación de que no estamos solos, de hecho yo creo que ya es una aceptación generalizada en la opinión
pública. Ese no es el problema.
El problema es que las autoridades lo reconozcan. Aquí, retomando lo que tú dices, Jaime, es importante recordar que en el decreto que firmó el presidente Biden el 24 de diciembre del 2022, se hablaba en una de las cláusulas precisamente de que las investigaciones se tenían que remitir al año de 1945, curiosamente el año del incidente de San Antonio, de Los Álamos, ¿no? Es decir, va de la mano con lo que tú estás comentando. Se está contemplando entre líneas estos incidentes donde se ha recuperado
la recuperación
naves.
de las naves y de la recuperación de la tecnología. Esa es la parte sensible de esto. Y sobre todo que el ejército se comportó muy mal, o sea, en función de la seguridad nacional, amenazó a los testigos. Acuérdate lo que nos decían la gente que encontramos en Roswell, cómo los habían amenazado, les habían dicho que el desierto era muy grande y que nunca nadie encontraría sus huesos, y los de ellos y de sus familias, ¿no? Entonces, pues fueron verdaderas amenazas de muerte a los testigos para que no hablaran. Si esto trasciende, si esto se sabe, ¿cómo va a reaccionar la opinión pública? Primero de los Estados Unidos y luego de todo el mundo. Y les preocupa mucho. Y yo creo que ellos quieren terminar, morirse, y que ya lo que vengan después, pues se enfrenten este problema, porque va a salir a la luz tarde o temprano. Ya está saliendo a la luz. Pero eso es la parte que sigue siendo la más preocupante para ellos.
La más sensible. No hay que olvidar que en los años 60 se redactó el informe Condom, recordarás, que determinaba que la humanidad no estaba lista para asimilar una noticia como la del contacto extraterrestre. Los tiempos han cambiado, ya vivimos nuevas generaciones que están totalmente abiertas a esta posibilidad, y bueno, falta ese gran salto.
Espérame, yo creo que la humanidad siempre ha estado preparada a esto, siempre, desde 1947. ¿Quién determinó? Ellos determinaron que no estaban. Sus científicos, sus intereses, ellos determinaron que debían mantener. ¿Y sabes por qué lo pudieron mantener en secreto? Y ellos lo dicen, porque estos seres no eran agresivos, porque no constituían un verdadero peligro, porque incluso no regresaban a recuperar los cadáveres de los que habían sido encontrados aquí en la Tierra, y todo eso les permitió poder alargar, vamos a decir esto, la liberación de la verdad, y así lo han mantenido por décadas y décadas, y así se la habían llevado hasta que sale el artículo el 16 de diciembre del 2017, donde pues algunas personas como Chris Mellon y Louis Elizondo pues fueron los que más impulsaron esto en el New York Times, ofrecieron las evidencias, los videos que recuperó Chris Mellon, y esto hizo que se diera la apertura. Y a partir de ahí, los pilotos empezaron a hablar, los pilotos fueron a ver a los congresistas en reuniones secretas, creo que a partir del 2020 fue, sí, o 2021, y ahí es donde empieza verdaderamente el gran cambio.
Así es, se generó con este artículo del New York Times un efecto dominó, porque ya no había manera de ocultar esta información, porque el artículo del New York Times pues puso de manifiesto que nunca dejaron de investigar el fenómeno OVNI, que siempre estuvieron pendientes de lo que estaba ocurriendo en los cielos, en el espacio marítimo y territorial de la Unión Americana, donde constantemente los pilotos de combate durante sus maniobras y ejercicios se encontraban con estos objetos. Lo que detectó, y este es algo que comentó Luis Elizondo, lo que él pudo detectar es que los pilotos sentían temor de dar estos reportes, que cuando se encontraban con objetos que no tenían nada, mejor se callaban para no tener problemas en su historial pues de combate como pilotos, y que bien esto derivó y motivó que precisamente se crearan estas oficinas para dar seguimiento a los reportes, y que bueno, sabemos que los videos de Gimbal, Tic Tac y Go Fast pues fueron tan solo la punta del iceberg, porque cuentan con muchísimo material clasificado de estos encuentros, y se ha llegado el momento de que lo liberen. De ahí la importancia de audiencias como las que vamos a tener el día de hoy.
En unos minutos estamos esperando que en cualquier momento se inicie para que ustedes puedan seguir esto. Yo les quiero recordar que la vamos a presentar en inglés, tal y como se produce, para que después nosotros podamos traducirla, presentársela a usted perfectamente bien a las 2 de la tarde, tiempo de la Ciudad de México. Usted la puede ver ahora y seguramente muchas cosas las va a entender, quizás algunas no, y lo puede volver a ver a las 2 de la tarde, o de plano verla a las 2 si no habla pizca de inglés. O si usted habla el inglés, pues aquí la va a tener directamente. Consideramos que tiene mucho valor escuchar en el idioma original lo que se está diciendo, porque a veces traemos un traductor y el traductor y se va perdiendo la versión original. Entonces vamos a tener las dos. Esa fue la idea detrás de esto, si ustedes me permiten, ¿no? Y por eso lo hicimos así. Podemos ir a una pausa para continuar aquí en esta transmisión histórica, la segunda audiencia pública que fue llamada por la senadora Kirsten Gillibrand, donde Sean Kirkpatrick, quien es de la oficina AARO del Pentágono, va a tratar de responder a las preguntas. Kirkpatrick se ha mostrado muy amigable hasta el día de hoy, abierto. Ahora veremos qué tan abierto está, qué tan preparado o qué tanta línea le dieron para que hablara o no hablara, o de qué podía hablar y qué no podía hablar. Así es que pues es interesantísimo lo que va a ocurrir en los próximos minutos. Estamos a la espera. En el momento que llegue la señal, nosotros se la vamos a poner aquí al aire. Vamos a una pequeñísima pausa para continuar. Pues seguimos esperando aquí, ahí está la señal, podemos ver la página del Congreso, donde estamos esperando que pues se inicie la sesión, ¿no? Ahí dice que estamos perfectamente en vivo, y pues son los canales de audiencias del Pentágono, y pues esperando en cualquier momento que se inicie esta transmisión, que hasta el momento pues no ha empezado. Así es que así son estas cosas, ¿no? Como pues no son una de televisión, que somos muy puntuales en la televisión, pues ellos es cuando estén listos, bueno, pues en ese momento se inicia. Yo no creo que tarde ya muchos minutos, en cualquier momento se va a iniciar esta audiencia pública tan importante. Quizás hasta más que la primera, Rubén, porque la primera audiencia dejó mucho que desear. Mucho que desear. Los dos personajes, ni me acuerdo sus nombres, que fueron del Pentágono, fueron a hacer lo que siempre saben hacer perfectamente, que es desacreditar el fenómeno. De hecho, pues una de las cosas que se dijo ahí fue que el video donde se veía un objeto captado en el mes de julio del 2019 frente a las costas de San Diego, era un dron comercial, ¿no? A 20 kilómetros de la costa, ¿cómo va a haber un dron comercial ahí? Y quedó muy claro que estaban mintiendo. Hace poco se habló de esa mentira que dijeron, y esa y otras, no fue la única.
Sí, ¿cómo olvidar, por ejemplo, cuando uno de los senadores le cuestionó a estos hombres si tenían conocimiento o qué podían decir acerca de los incidentes en bases nucleares, ya que se contaba con la documentación, documentos oficiales y con los testimonios de militares en retiro que estaban dispuestos a hablar.
Y que dijeron que no sabían nada.
No, que no sabían nada. Y el senador les dijo, pero si son documentos de ustedes, y se voltearon a ver entre ellos como diciendo, echándose la bolita, y no supieron qué responder. Esto resulta insólito, y como tú dices, se vuelve costumbre la negación de información y de documentos que ellos mismos manejan. Entonces, ojalá que esta audiencia, como tú mencionas, parece y es prometedora, que va a ser un poquito más abierta, porque Sean Kirkpatrick, como hemos dicho, pues se ha mostrado a favor de la visita extraterrestre. Si bien es cierto, no lo ha dicho de manera abierta, así lo sugirió en este artículo que mencionamos, que le dio la vuelta al mundo, que causó gran conmoción, que escribió en conjunto con Avi Loeb, donde precisamente hablan de esta posibilidad de la visita extraterrestre. Y bueno, la senadora Kirsten Gillibrand, que va a encabezar esta audiencia, pues como sabemos ha sido una de las mayores impulsoras de esta legislación en torno a los objetos anómalos no identificados. Ella, junto con el senador Marco Rubio y Rubén Gallego de Arizona, pues han venido impulsando y redactando estas leyes, Jaime, que son históricas y que han sido firmadas por los presidentes de los Estados Unidos, tanto Donald Trump como Joe Biden.
¿Aún no tenemos la señal? ¿Aún no está la señal? Bueno, pues ya estamos muy ansiosos de que empiece esto, para escuchar, saber qué es lo que se va a decir. Hoy se va a determinar el rumbo que va a seguir toda esta desclasificación, que así debemos de considerarla, que se ha venido dando en los últimos años y que pues ha llegado al clímax con estas audiencias públicas, ¿no? Esto se anunció, esta audiencia, el medio que se llama Político en los Estados Unidos anunció que esto iba a darse durante el mes de abril, y hace unos días se confirmó, y hoy pues la tenemos pues ya prácticamente aquí al aire, no sé, esperando ya, un poquito ansioso, no nos vayan a bloquear la señal o algo así, ¿no?
Así es. Y bueno, es importante recordar, Jaime, amigos del auditorio, que estas audiencias, a final de cuentas, Jaime, son un ejercicio de rendición de cuentas. Los funcionarios están obligados a hablar con la verdad. Y como lo has mencionado, ha habido en las pasadas audiencias, pues se ha descubierto que han mentido abiertamente estos hombres, lo cual es muy grave, porque se ha llegado el momento de hablar con la verdad y de reconocer de que en los cielos existe algo que parece tecnología no humana. También es importante mencionar, Jaime, está pendiente el tema de los incidentes del 11, 12, perdón, 10, 11 y 12 de febrero.
Sí, pues se ha especulado si se va a hablar de esto, no se ha dicho.
Se tiene que hablar.
Bueno, yo también pienso igual, pero el Pentágono seguramente no, porque ¿cuál es la pregunta? A ver, ¿por qué no han dado a conocer las imágenes del momento del derribo de estos objetos, imágenes previas, saber cómo eran, saber cómo cayeron? Luego recordemos que en CNN se dijo que los restos del primer objeto habían caído en un área congelada, ¿sí? Y que ya estaban siendo recuperados a la mañana siguiente, y después de una semana dijeron, no, cayeron en el mar y no los vamos a recuperar. O sea, evidentemente que se ocultó la información ahí, y esto es algo que se tiene que discutir abiertamente. Yo espero que el día de hoy esto pueda ocurrir y podamos tener más información de lo que ocurrió con esos supuestos objetos que dijeron que eran globos y que ahora son de seguridad nacional, ¿no?
Así es, recordamos que John Greenwald Jr., este investigador norteamericano que es ampliamente conocido por tener el archivo de documentos desclasificados más grande de todo el mundo, él desde que era niño pedía documentos al FBI, a la CIA, a todas las instituciones de seguridad nacional de los Estados Unidos en torno al fenómeno OVNI. Pues bien, él realizó una petición, una solicitud en torno a los documentos e información, videos, fotografías que hubiese de estos incidentes ocurridos en territorio de Alaska, en Canadá y en los Estados Unidos, y bueno, le respondieron que no, que por el momento no podían porque se mantenían clasificados, demasiado sospechoso para tratarse de simples globos chinos, independientemente de que sean espías o meteorológicos. Pues resultó muy raro, Jaime, que decidieran ocultar la información. Pues simplemente si se trató de globos de cualquier naturaleza, pues ahí están las fotografías, ahí están las imágenes, tal y como lo hicieron en el incidente del 2 de febrero, que liberaron la fotografía que fue tomada desde el interior de la cabina de un avión U-2, donde claramente se veía que era un globo.
Respecto a eso tuvimos todo, cómo fue derribado, cómo pues ocurrió todo, ¿no? Realmente ahí no se ocultó nada de información. En cambio, con los otros tres que se suponía que eran globos meteorológicos, que no eran peligrosos, que posiblemente eran de los Estados Unidos, pues en eso sí, pues no supimos absolutamente nada, ¿no?
Hablando coloquialmente, digamos que en ese momento la apuesta era a creer que estos tres objetos en ese momento se trataba también de globos espías, o sea, no hubiéramos metido tanto las manos, Jaime, por decir que se trataba de objetos anómalos no identificados, pero en este momento con el claro ocultamiento de información que hay de estos incidentes, pues ya empezamos a sospechar que tal vez se trató de algo más.
Ya me hace sospechar esto, que no abren la señal.
Así es.
No abren la señal. Yo sabía que es una audiencia pública, abierta, y pues no sé si podemos checar si estamos bien o qué es lo que está pasando. Alberto, por favor, ya son muchos minutos, ya son más de 20 minutos de retraso. Ya me extraña que esto pues no se haya iniciado todavía, y pues el link de esto fue sacado directamente de la página de Kirsten Gillibrand, de la senadora que va a participar, entonces no debe haber duda de que estamos en el canal correcto, pero pues ya no sé.
Así es.
Ya no sé, mano.
Está en vivo y tiene 1 hora con 40 minutos que comenzó a transmitir con esta cortinilla, en donde se anuncia precisamente la realización de esta audiencia, y bueno, pues van bastante retrasados, creemos.
Pues sí, bueno, vamos a otra pausa y regresamos aquí mientras vamos a ver qué está pasando. Ante la intensa actividad del fenómeno extraterrestre que se está dando en la Tierra, ante los extraordinarios cambios en las altas esferas del gobierno, ante los hechos misteriosos que no nos quieren revelar, lo invito este sábado 6 de mayo a las 7 de la noche a The Grand Theater en Anaheim, California. No lo olvide, no humanos, las evidencias. Bueno, pues seguimos a la espera, ignoramos qué es lo que pasa. No, estaba programado esto a las 8:30 de la mañana, tiempo de México, y hasta el momento no. Aquí podemos ver la página donde estamos directamente conectados. Aquí dice claramente, dice abierto, cerrado, para recibir el testimonio de la misión, de las actividades de la misión, un análisis general y el presupuesto del All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, que es AARO, que es la que está encargada de la investigación del fenómeno, y pues estamos esperando a que pues esto se dé, porque pues hasta el momento no tenemos la señal y debe empezar en cualquier momento. Yo espero que no haya habido cambios o que no la hayan suspendido o que no haya pasado nada de lo que no estemos enterados, y por qué pues desafortunadamente no están transmitiendo hasta ahora como se había prometido. Así es que pues nosotros seguimos aquí, Rubén.
Así es, pues bueno, todo parece indicar que la burocracia en los Estados Unidos no es tan diferente a la de otros países. Aquí vamos a estar pendientes porque, bueno, ustedes lo vieron, amigos, estaba programada para las 10:30 de la mañana, tiempo de Washington.
Ya son las 9:05, tiempo de México, las 11:05, ya hay un retraso de 35 minutos, lo cual no es normal, y esto no me gusta nada.
Así es, pero vamos a estar muy pendientes. No se desconecten, amigos, al igual que nosotros los invitamos a tener un poquito de paciencia porque esto es muy importante.
Ante la intensa actividad del fenómeno extraterrestre que se está dando en la Tierra, ante los extraordinarios cambios en las altas esferas del gobierno, ante los hechos misteriosos que no nos quieren revelar, lo invito este sábado 6 de mayo a las 7 de la noche a The Grand Theater en Anaheim, California. No lo olvide, no humanos, las evidencias.
The hearing will come to order. I'd first like to thank our witness, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, for testifying here and in today's earlier closed session, and for his long and distinguished career, both in the intelligence community and in the Department of Defense. Dr. Kirkpatrick is the director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. Congress established this office in law to get to the bottom of the very serious problem of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP. Dr. Kirkpatrick has a very difficult mission. While we have made progress, there remains a stigma attached to these phenomenon. There is a vast and complex citizen engagement, and there's also very challenging scientific and technical hurdles. So we appreciate the willingness of Dr. Kirkpatrick to lean in on this issue and the work that he has accomplished thus far. And we look forward to both his opening statement and his presentation of examples of the work AARO has done. In late 2017, media reports surfaced about activities set in motion by the late long-serving Majority Leader Senator Harry Reid more than a decade ago. We learned that there was strong evidence of advanced technology reflected in the features and performance characteristics of many objects observed by our highly trained service members operating top-of-the-line military equipment. We learned that for the past 8 years, military pilots frequently encountered unknown objects in controlled airspace off both the east and west coast across the continental United States in test and training areas and ranges. We don't know where they come from, who made them, or how they operate. As former Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist observed, had any of these objects had the label "Made in China," there would be an uproar in the government and media. There would be no stone unturned and no effort spared to find out what we were dealing with. We can look at the recent incursion of the unidentified PRC high-altitude balloon as an example. But because of the UFO stigma, the response has been irresponsibly anemic and slow. Congress established AARO. We made it clear that we expect vigorous action. We added very substantial initial funding for the office, but despite our best efforts, the President's budget for fiscal years 23 and 24 requested only enough funding to defray the operating expenses of AARO. It included almost no funds to sustain the critical research and development necessary to support a serious investigation. It took a letter to Secretary Austin from Senator Rubio and me and 14 other senators to get the office temporary relief for the current fiscal year. In this hearing, I intend to probe a series of specific issues. In the recent incidents where multiple objects were shot down over North America, it seemed that Pentagon leadership did not turn to AARO office to play a leading role in advising the combatant commander. We need to know whether this will continue. We need to know whether the leadership in DoD will bring AARO into the decision-making process in a visible way, and we need to know what role AARO will play in interagency coordination after the NSC working group disbands. In the fiscal year 2023 National Defense and Intelligence Authorization Acts, Congress established a direct reporting chain from the AARO Director to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The role of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security is limited to providing administrative support. We need to know how this direction is being implemented. UAP are frequently observed flying in extremely high or very low speeds and come in various sizes and shapes. During the recent shootdowns over North America, DoD disclosed that filters on radar systems were adjusted to allow for detection and tracking of diverse sets of objects for the first time. While opening the aperture can overload the real-time analytic process, we cannot keep turning a blind eye to surveillance data that is critical to detecting and tracking UAP. We need to know whether Dr. Kirkpatrick can achieve the necessary control over sensor filters and the storage and access to raw surveillance data to find UAP anomalies. Finally, one of the tasks Congress set for AARO is serving as an open door for witnesses of UAP events or participants in government activities related to UAPs to come forward securely and disclose what they know without fear of retribution for any possible violations of previously signed non-disclosure agreements. Congress mandated that AARO set up a publicly discoverable and accessible process for safe disclosure. While we know that AARO has already conducted a significant number of interviews, many referred by Congress, we need to set up a public process and we need to know where that effort stands. With that, I'd like to turn to Senator Ernst for her opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Kirkpatrick, for your testimony today. I'll keep these remarks very brief so that we have maximum time for your briefing. The recent downing of the Chinese surveillance balloon and 3 other objects underscores the need for domain awareness. Adversaries like China and Russia are working to hold U.S. interests, including our homeland, at risk. That's why your testimony is so important, and I so look forward to a progress update on the establishment of your office. As members know, your office evolved from the Navy-led Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force to the All-Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, known as AARO. Dr. Kirkpatrick, your extensive background in science and technology, research and development, and space makes you well-suited to discuss these emerging challenges. My priority is that we understand the full range of threats posed by our adversaries in all domains. That is what the Joint Force needs to be prepared to fight and win in defense of our nation. This committee needs to know about Chinese or Russian advanced technology programs to exploit our vulnerabilities, and it needs to know whether your office, along with the IC, has detected potential Chinese or Russian capabilities to surveil or attack us. Finally, we need to ensure efficient interagency coordination. Multiple elements of the DoD and IC own a piece of this mission. To add value, AARO's efforts cannot be redundant with others. Thank you again. We look forward to your testimony.
Dr. Kirkpatrick, you can give your testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Ernst, distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's a privilege to be here today to testify on the Defense's efforts to address unidentified anomalous phenomena. First, I want to thank Congress for its extensive and continued partnership as the Department works to better understand and respond to UAP in an effort to minimize technical and intelligence surprise. Unidentified objects in any domain pose potential risks to safety and security, particularly from military personnel and capabilities. Congress and DoD agree that UAP cannot remain unexamined or unaddressed. We are grateful for sustained congressional engagement on this issue, which paved the way for the DoD's establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in July of last year. Though AARO is still a young office, the spotlight on UAP in recent months underscores the importance of its work and the need for UAP to be taken seriously as a matter of national security. All leadership that I've had the pleasure of working with, whether DoD, IC, DOE, civil, scientific, or industrial, view Congress as a critical partner in this endeavor. AARO has accomplished much in the last 9 months since it was established. The AARO team of more than 36 experts is organized around 4 functional areas: operations, scientific research, integrated analysis, and strategic communications. In the 9 months since AARO's establishment, we've taken important steps to involve and improve UAP data collection, standardize the department's UAP internal reporting requirements, and implement a framework for rigorous scientific and intelligence analysis, allowing us to resolve cases in a systematic and prioritized manner. Meanwhile, consistent with legislative direction, AARO is also carefully reviewing and researching the U.S. government's UAP-related historical record. AARO is leading a focused effort to better characterize, understand, and attribute UAP, with priority given to UAP reports by DoD and IC personnel in or near areas of national security importance. DoD fully appreciates the eagerness from many quarters, especially here in Congress and in the American public, to quickly resolve every UAP encountered across the globe, from the distant past through today. It's important to note, however, AARO is the culmination of decades of DoD, intelligence community, and congressionally directed efforts to successfully resolve UAP encountered first and foremost by U.S. military personnel, specifically Navy and Air Force pilots. The law establishing AARO is ambitious, and it will take time to realize the full mission. We cannot answer decades of questions about UAP all at once, but we must begin somewhere. While I assure you that AARO will follow scientific evidence wherever it leads, I ask for your patience as DoD first prioritizes the safety and security of our military personnel and installations in all domains. After all, a UAP encountered first by highly capable DoD and IC platforms, featuring the nation's most advanced sensors, are those UAP most likely to be resolved by my office, assuming the data can be collected. If AARO succeeds in first improving the ability of military personnel to quickly and confidently resolve UAP they encounter, I believe that in time we will have greatly advanced the capability of the entire United States government, including its civilian agencies, to resolve UAP. However, it would be naive to believe that the resolution of all UAP can be solely accomplished by the DoD and IC alone. We will need to prioritize collection and leverage authorities for monitoring all domains within the continental United States. AARO's ultimate success will require partnerships with the interagency, industry partners, academia, and the scientific community, as well as the public. AARO is partnering with the services, intelligence community, DOE, as well as civil partners and across the U.S. government to tap into the resources of the interagency. The UAP challenge is more an operational and scientific issue than it is an intelligence issue. As such, we are working with industry, academia, and the scientific community, which bring their own resources, ideas, and expertise to this challenging problem set. Robust collaboration and peer review across a broad range of partners will promote greater objectivity and transparency in the study of UAP. I want to underscore today that only a very small percentage of UAP reports display signatures that could reasonably be described as anomalous. The majority of unidentified objects reported to AARO demonstrate mundane characteristics of balloons, unmanned aerial systems, clutter, natural phenomena, or other readily explainable sources. While a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases. Without sufficient data, we are unable to reach defendable conclusions that meet the high scientific standards we set for resolution, and I will not close a case that I cannot defend the conclusions of. I recognize that this answer is unsatisfying to those who in good faith assume that what they see with their eyes, with their cameras, and with their radars is incontrovertible evidence of extraordinary characteristics and performance. Yet time and again, with sufficient scientific quality data, it is fact that UAP often, but not always, resolve into readily explainable sources. Humans are subject to deception and illusions, sensors to unexpected responses and malfunctions, and in some cases, intentional interference. Getting to the handful of cases that pass this level of scrutiny is the mission of AARO. That is not to say that UAP, once resolved, are no longer of national security interest, however. On the contrary, learning that a UAP isn't of exotic origin, but is instead just a quadcopter or balloon, leads to the question of who is operating that quadcopter and to what purpose. The answers to those questions will inform potential national security or law enforcement responses. AARO is a member of the department's support to the administration's Tiger Team effort to deal with stratospheric objects such as the PRC high-altitude balloon. When previously unknown objects are successfully identified, it is AARO's role to quickly and efficiently hand off such readily explainable objects to the intelligence, law enforcement, or operational safety communities for further analysis and appropriate action. In other words, AARO's mission is to turn UAP into SEP, somebody else's problem. The U.S. government, the DoD and the IC in particular, has tremendous capabilities to deal with those encountered objects. In the wake of the PRC HAB event, the interagency is working to better integrate and share information to address identifiable stratospheric objects, but that is not AARO's lane. Meanwhile, for the few cases in all domains, space, air, and sea, that do demonstrate potentially anomalous characteristics, AARO exists to help the DoD, IC, and interagency resolve those anomalous cases. In doing so, AARO is approaching these cases with the highest level of objectivity and analytic rigor. This includes physically testing and employing modeling and simulation to validate our analyses and underlying theories, then peer reviewing those results within the U.S. government, industry partners, and appropriately cleared academic institutions before reaching any conclusions. I should also state clearly for the record that in our research, AARO has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. In the event sufficient scientific data were ever obtained that a UAP encountered can only be explained by extraterrestrial origin, we are committed to working with our interagency partners at NASA to appropriately inform U.S. government's leadership of its findings. For those few cases that have leaked to the public previously and subsequently commented on by the U.S. government, I encourage those who hold alternative theories or views to submit your research to credible peer-reviewed scientific journals. Arrow is working very hard to do the same. That is how science works, not by blog or social media. We know that there is tremendous public interest in UAP and a desire for answers from Arrow. By its very nature, the UAP challenge has for decades lent itself to mystery, sensationalism, and even conspiracy. For that reason, Arrow remains committed to transparency, accountability, and to sharing as much with the American public as we can, consistent with our obligation to protect not only intelligence sources and methods, but U.S. and allied capabilities. However, Arrow's work will take time if we are committed to do it right. It means adhering to the scientific method and the highest standards of research integrity. It means being methodical and scrupulous. It means withholding judgment in favor of evidence. It means following the data where it leads, wherever it leads. It means establishing scientific peer-reviewed theoretical underpinnings of observed data, and Arrow is committed to all of those standards. I'm proud of Arrow's progress over the last 9 months. Much remains to be done, but the hard work is underway. Thank you for your continued support. And before we turn to questions, I'm going to walk you through some of our analytical trends and a couple of cases that we've prepared. So one of the things that Arrow does is high integrity analysis, as I've said. This chart represents the trend analysis of all the cases in Arrow's holdings right to date. What you'll see on the left is a histogram of all of our reported sightings as a function of altitude. So most of our sightings occur in the 15 to 25,000 foot range, and that is ultimately because that's where a lot of our aircraft are. On the far right upper corner, you'll see a breakout of the morphologies of all of the UAP that are reported. Over half, about 52% of what's been reported to us, are round orb spheres. The rest of those break out into all kinds of different other shapes. The gray box is essentially there's no data on what its shape is. Either it wasn't reported or the sensor did not collect it. The bottom map is a heat map of all reporting areas across the globe that we have available to us. What you'll notice is that there is a heavy, what we call collection bias, both in altitude and in geographic location. That's where all of our sensors exist. That's where our training ranges are, that's where our operational ranges are, that's where all of our platforms are. In the middle, what we have done is reduce the most typically reported UAP characteristics to these fields, mostly round, mostly 1 to 4 meters, white, silver, translucent, metallic, 10,000 to 30,000 feet, with apparent velocities from stationary to Mach 2. No thermal exhausts usually detected. We get intermittent radar returns, we get intermittent radio returns, and we get intermittent thermal signatures. That's what we're looking for and trying to understand what that is. Next slide. So I'm going to walk you through 2 cases that we've declassified recently. This first one is an MQ-9 in the Middle East, observing that blow up, which is an apparent spherical object via EO sensors. Those are not IR. If you want to go ahead and click that and play it, you'll see it come through the top of the screen. There it goes, and then the camera will slew to follow it. You'll see it pop in and out of the field of view there. This is essentially all of the data we have associated with this event from some years ago. It is going to be virtually impossible to fully identify that just based off of that video. Now, what we can do and what we are doing is keeping that as part of that group of 52% to see what are the similarities, what are the trends across all of these, do we see these in a particular distribution, do they all behave the same or not? As we get more data, we will be able to go back and look at these in a fuller context. How are we going to get more data? We are working with the Joint Staff to issue guidance to all the services and commands that will then establish what are the reporting requirements, the timeliness, and all of the data that is required to be delivered to us and retained from all of the associated sensors. That historically hasn't been the case, and it's been happenstance that data has been collected. Next slide. This particular event, South Asia MQ-9, looking at another MQ-9, and what's highlighted there in that red circle is an object that flies through the screen. Unlike the previous one, this one actually shows some really interesting things that everyone thought was truly anomalous to start with. First of all, it's a high-speed object that's flying in the field of regard of 2 MQ-9s. Second, it appears to have this trail behind it, all right, which at first blush you would think that looks like a propulsion trail. In reality, if you want to play the first slide, we'll show you what that looks like in real time, our first video. So we're looking at that. There it goes. Why don't you play it again and then pause it halfway through? Right there. All right, if you might be able to see that trail there behind it. That's actually not a real trail. That is a sensor artifact. Each one of those little blobs is actually a representation of the object as it's moving through. And later in the video, as the camera slews, that trail actually follows the direction of the camera, not the direction of the object. We pulled these apart frame by frame. We were able to demonstrate that that is essentially a readout overlap of the image. It's a shadow image, right? It's not real. Further, if you later follow this all the way to end, it starts to resolve itself into that blob that's in that picture in the top left, right? And if you squint, it looks like an aircraft because it actually turns out to be an aircraft. Go ahead and put that on. So you'll see the tail sort of pop out there. And so what you're looking at is, this is in the infrared, this is the heat signature off of the engines of a commuter aircraft that happened to be flying in the vicinity of where those 2 MQ-9s were at. Why am I showing you this? So the first one that I showed you, we don't have resolved yet, right? That is an unresolved case we are still studying. This one we can resolve. But this is the kind of data that we have to work with and the type of analysis that we have to do, which can be quite extensive when you have to pull these apart frame by frame. Further, we're now matching all of this with the models of all of those imaging sensors so that I can say, I can recreate this. I can actually show how the sensor is going to respond. All of these sensors don't necessarily respond the way you think they do, especially out in the world and in the field. And I believe that's all I have, and I will open it up for your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirkpatrick. Can you just give us some raw numbers of how many UAPs you've analyzed, how many have been resolved, and sort of in what buckets, and then how many are still left to be resolved? Just an update from your January public report where it was 366 or something, and about 150 were balloons and about 24 were drones. You know, just give us an update if you have one.
Sure. So as of this week, we are tracking over a total of 650 cases. Now, the report in January basically said about half of the ones at that time, about 150, were likely balloon-like or something like that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they're resolved. Oh, I see. Okay, so what? Let me walk everyone through what our analytic process looks like. We have essentially a 5-step process, right? So we get our cases in with all the data. We create a case for that event. My team does a preliminary scrub of all of those cases as they come in, just to sort out, do we have any information that says this is in one of those likely categories? It's likely a balloon, it's likely a bird, it's likely some other object, or we don't know. Then we prioritize those based off of where they are. Are they attached to a national security area? Does it show some anomalous phenomenology that is of interest? If it's just a spherical thing that's floating around with the wind and it has no payload on it, that's going to be less important than something that has a payload on it, which will be less important than something that's maneuvering, right? So there's sort of a hierarchy of just binning the priorities because we can't do all of them at once. Once we do that and we prioritize them, when we take that package of data in that case, and I have set up two teams, think of this as a red team, blue team, or a competitive analysis. I have an intelligence community team made up of intelligence analysts, and I have an S&T team made up of scientists and engineers and the people that actually build a lot of these sensors, or physicists, because if you're a physicist, you can do anything, right? But they're not associated with the intel community. They're not intel officers. So they look at this through the lens of the sensor, of what the data says. We give that package to both teams. The intelligence community is going to look at it through the lens of the intelligence record and what they assess, and their intel tradecraft, which they have very specific rules and regulations on how they do that. Scientific community, technical community is going to look at it through the lens of what is the data telling me? What is the sensor doing? What would I expect a sensor response to be? And back that out. Those two groups give us their answers. We then adjudicate. If they agree, then I am more likely to close that case if they agree on what it is. If they disagree, we will have an adjudication. We'll bring them together, we'll take a look at the differences, we'll adjudicate why do you say one thing and you say another. We will then come to a case recommendation. That'll get written up by my team. That then goes to a senior technical advisory group, which is outside of all of those people, made up of senior technical folks and intel analysts and operators from retired out of the community. And they essentially peer review what that case recommendation is. They write their recommendations. That comes back to me. I review it. We make a determination, and I'll sign off one way or the other. And then that will go out as the case determination. Once we have an approved web portal to hang the unclassified stuff, we will downgrade and declassify things and put it out there. In the meantime, we're putting a lot of these on our classified web portal, where we can then collaborate with the rest of the community so they can see what's going on. That's, in a nutshell, that is the process, right? So because of that, that takes time. So of those over 650, we've prioritized about half of them to be of anomalous, interesting value. And now we have to go through those and go, how much do I have actual data for? Because if all I have is a operator report that says I saw X, Y, or Z, my assessment is A, B, or C, that's not really sufficient. That's a good place to start, but I have to have data. I have to have radar data, I have to have EO data, I have to have thermal data, I have to have overhead data, and we need to look at all that. Now, from a big picture perspective, I still have, that's all still very valuable data, and we're looking at applying a lot of things, new tools, analytic tools like natural language processing. So I can go across all of those reports and look for commonalities. How many of them are being described as round spherical objects that are maneuvering? How many of them are not maneuvering? How many of them seem to have a plume to it or note? That's also going to be very valuable to give us more of a global picture and a trends analysis of what are we seeing, right? And help us get to the determination. So go back to your question, ma'am. We have this next quarterly report will be coming out here pretty soon. Our next annual report, you all have given us, moved it up to June, July. We're going to be having that done about that time frame, and we will have we'll be combining a whole number of reports into that one. I think we're currently sitting at around, if I remember correctly, we're around 20 to 30-ish are about halfway through that analytic process. A handful of them have made it all the way out to the other side, gone through peer review. We've got case closure reports done and signed. We're going to get faster as we get more people on board and we get more of the community tools to automate some of the analysis that has to be done.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Kirkpatrick, the ODNI annual threat assessment states that China's space activities are designed to erode U.S. influence across military, technological, economic, and diplomatic spheres. Likewise, Russia will remain a key space competitor. In the course of your work, have you become aware of any Chinese or Russia technical advancements to surveil or attack U.S. interests?
So that's a great question. Part of what we have to do as we go through these, especially the ones that show signatures of advanced technical capabilities, is determine if there's a foreign nexus. Mm-hmm. That's really hard if what we observe doesn't have a Chinese or Russian flag on the side of it. Now, I think it is prudent to say of the cases that are showing some sort of advanced technical signature, of which we're talking single percentages of the entire population of cases we have. I am concerned about what that nexus is, and I have indicators that some are related to foreign capabilities. We have to investigate that with our IC partners, and as we get evidence to support that, that gets then handed off to the appropriate IC agency to investigate. Again, it becomes an SEP at that point.
Yeah, somebody else's problem.
Right.
Very good. Thank you. Yes. Is it possible that the Chinese or Russian advanced technologies could be causing some of these anomalous behaviors? And you said there seems to be some indicators. So just for us today, could you describe potential threat that might exist out there if they are foreign nexus?
In order to do this research appropriately, we have to also be cognizant of what is the state of the art in development across the S&T community. What are the DARPAs of the world doing? What's the horizon scanning of emerging technologies appropriate to this subcommittee? What is happening out there? And if somebody could accelerate that capability, how would that manifest itself and what would it look like? And do those signatures match what we're seeing? Mm-hmm. There are emerging capabilities out there that in many instances, Russia and China, well, China in particular, are on par or ahead of us in some areas. Right. So previously, I used to be the Defense Department's intelligence officer for science and technical intelligence. That was our job, was to look for what does all that look like. And then, my last several years, of course, in Space Command doing space. The adversary is not waiting. They are advancing, and they're advancing quickly. If I were to put on some of my old hats, I would tell you they are less risk averse at technical advancement than we are. Right? They are just willing to try things and see if it works. Are there capabilities that could be employed against us in both an ISR and a weapons fashion? Absolutely. Do I have evidence that they're doing it in these cases? No, but I have concerning indicators.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is why it's so important that you are working with the intelligence community as well, because you have the science, the data background, but you also need to know from various sources what adversaries may be working on. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rhodes. Well, thank you, Chair Gillibrand, Ranking Member Ernst. This is a really important hearing. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Kirkpatrick, for your service to the country, and as a former systems analyst myself, I really appreciate your flow chart, the description of the process, and particularly the trends analysis going forward, how that's going to help us. And you talked about language, the large LLMs, the large language models, artificial intelligence. That's really going to help us in the hunt forward. Predictive analysis, I think, to some of your point, what we're worried about. But I want to focus on Nevada because I want to talk about the impact of UAPs on aviation safety. So when it comes to unidentified aerial phenomena, one of my first concerns is really about the safety of Nevada's military aviator. So we have airmen stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, naval aviators flying at Naval Air Station Fallon, and service members from across the world training at the Nevada Test and Training Range. I know you know all this. And unfortunately, the existence of advanced UAPs in the U.S. airspace and over U.S. military installations, not a new phenomenon. The Navy's officially acknowledged that between 2004 and 2021, 11 near misses occurred involving UAPs that required pilot action and follow-up reports. As a result, in 2019, the Navy established a protocol for pilots to report on their dangerous encounters. So could you speak to any ongoing efforts within DoD to ensure the safety of our aviators with a potential UAP encounter, and what's your relationship with Northcom, NORAD, Spacecom when it comes to this immediate real-time response, and how they're right there in the moment, right?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So let me start with, my relationship with the commands are very good. I just came back from sitting down with General Van Herk and all the J staff out at Northcom a couple weeks ago, talking through exactly what we need to do to help them get their arms around this. We are also working very closely with Joint Staff, and the Joint Staff has just been very outstanding in helping work through policy and guidance issues to the forces and to the services. And I would like to just make sure that we message back to all of the operators the importance of their reporting, and the fact that you're about to get a bunch of new requirements that we're issuing through the Joint Staff on all of the data that we're going to need you to save and report back to us. It is invaluable, and we are working to try to take the most advantage of that to learn what it is that we're trying to mitigate. To get directly to your question, first thing that we're doing is normalizing our reporting, right? We're standardizing our reporting and the requirements associated with that. Guidance from the Joint Staff, I think, goes out maybe this week, maybe next week, that we've been working with them for some months that does exactly what I just said. It gives them timelines, it gives them requirements, it gives them, here's all the data you have to have, and you got to retain it. The next thing that comes after that is a plan ord that will go out to the commands for mitigation and response. So there's a couple of things that we have to do. One, I need to work with the commands and with the IC and with our outside of our DoD and IC partners to extend our collection posture targeted at some of these key areas that you saw on that heat map. That have a lot of activity, so that we can turn on extra collection when an operator sees something. So part of this is generating is a response function, what we call a tactic, technique, and procedure for an operator. When he sees something, calls back to the operations floor, they can turn on additional collection. What does that collection look like? How do I bring all that together so I can get more data on what is that thing?
Can I ask really quickly,
Sure.
do you have the authorities you need to extend your collection posture between agencies or branches of the military? Because that seems to me to maybe be a sticking point. I know my time's just about up. I'd love to follow up about your risk management methodologies for some of these, but do you need any authorities that you don't have to get the data?
There are
you need?
some authorities that we need. We currently are operating under Title X authorities, but we have good relationships across the other agencies, but having additional authorities for collection, tasking, counterintelligence,
That's something.
those are all things that would be helpful, yes.
Thank you.
To follow up, Dr. Kirkpatrick, will you help us write that language so we can put it in the defense bill this year so that we know what authorities you need?
We can do that.
Thank you. We're going to start second round, so if you want to stay, you can ask another round. I have at least 3 more questions, so. Do you want to go right now, so in case you have to leave? Oh, I could. I do. Yeah, go ahead.
That would be great. I'm going to stay on the drones issue because obviously we also have Creech Air Force Base. We talked about those reefers. But last February, the Chinese spy balloon, it did cross through the U.S. airspace, shot down by a Sidewinder missile fired from an F-22. Sidewinders cost us close to $500,000 each. So, given the cost of these missiles, the cost per flight, all of these other things, like I said, follow up on the authorities, your methodologies, the data collection, they can help us in other ways. But how do you think we can develop a sustainable, affordable response to UAPs where we need to, that will definitely violate our airspace, definitely violate our airspace every chance that they can get because they're our adversaries. They want this information. So what do you think some cost-effective measures might be that we can get what we need out of that or take them down, whatever's appropriate, whatever the appropriate measure is, let's put it that way.
So that is actually wrapped into the plan org that we're working with Joint Staff to send out. What do the commands need from both a capabilities perspective for kinetic and non-kinetic engagements? What are the response functions of the particular wings or Navy, what have you? And then what authorities do they need?
Right.
So one of the challenges that we've seen is there's an authorities issues with the owners, operators of those ranges that they need to work through, and we're working that with Joint Staff and OSD. So big picture, we need to do all that. If you want to get down to the specifics there are non-kinetic options to engage pretty much everything, right? Whether it's electronic warfare, whether it's laser technology.
That's where this data,
That's right.
the good data collection, predictive
Correct.
analytics, you can make some assumptions on possibilities.
That's right. And we will inform recommendations back to the department on here's what could work, here's what we've seen work, here's what doesn't work.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to talk a little bit about your logistics, who you report to, how that's going, whether you need different reporting lines. By congressional legislation, your office is administratively located with the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, but you're not substantively subordinate to the Undersecretary. Rather, you are a direct report to the Deputy Secretary. Are you taking direction directly from the Deputy Secretary? Are you able to meet and brief the Deputy Secretary? Is the Office of USD INS working with you to have the right framework?
So USD INS, I currently report to USD INS until they come up with the plan for how they're going to implement legislation. DOD and DNI are working through that now. I'd have to refer you back to USD INS on what their plan is.
Do I need to update your reporting structure in the next defense bill, or is this something that you think will work its way out, or does it need further clarity?
I think they're planning on coming back to you with an answer on what that plan is, and I think at that time that will inform what you want to do.
Okay, thank you. As you know, Dr. Kirkpatrick, Congress has mandated that your office establish a discoverable and accessible electronic method for potential witnesses of UAP incidents and potential participants in government UAP-related activities to contact your office and tell their stories. Congress also set up a process whereby people subject to non-disclosure agreements, preventing them from disclosing what they may have witnessed or participated in, could tell you what they know without risk of retribution from or violation of their NDAs. Have you submitted a public-facing website product for approval to your superiors, and how long has it been under review?
I have. We submitted the first version of that before Christmas.
And do you have an estimate from them when they will respond or when you'll have feedback on that?
No, I don't.
Okay. We will author a letter asking for that timely response to your superiors. When do you expect that you will establish a public-facing, discoverable, and access portal for people to use to contact your office as the law requires?
So I would like to first say thank you all very much for referring the witnesses that you have thus far to us. I appreciate that. We've brought in nearly 24 so far. It's been very helpful. I'd ask that you continue to do that until we have an approved plan. Mm-hmm. We have a multi-phased approach for doing that we've been socializing and have submitted for approval sometime. Mm-hmm. Once that happens, then we should be able to push all that out and get this a little more automated.
Great.
What I would ask, though, is as you all continue to refer to us and refer witnesses to us, I'd appreciate if you do that. Please try to prioritize the ones that you want to do, because we do have a small research staff dealing with that.
Thank you. And then do you have any plans for public engagement that you want to share now that you think it's important that the public knows what the plan is?
So we have a number of public engagement recommendations according to our strategic plan. All of those have been submitted for approval. They have to be approved by USDINS. We are waiting for approval to go do that.
Okay, I will follow up on that. And then my last question is about the integration of departments' UAP operations, research analysis, and strategic communications. During the recent UAP incidents over North America, it didn't appear that you were allowed to play that role. Do you agree that the public perception is generally that you and your office did not appear to play a major role in the department's response to the detection of objects over North America? What can you tell us that's going on behind the scenes from your perspective? And in the after-action assessment process, is there awareness that there is a need to operate differently in the future and a commitment to doing so?
When the objects were first detected, I got called by Joint Staff Leadership to come in late one night to review events as they were unfolding and to give them an assessment based on what we knew at that time. I did that, worked with the Director of Joint Staff, the J2 and the J3 that night and over the couple of following days on what are the types of things that we are tracking from an unidentified object perspective, what databases do we use, those sorts of things for known objects, known tracking. Beyond that, the response, I would have to refer you back to the White House for the decision on how they did the response. We did not play a role in what you would respond, other than that initial, advice on what we are seeing and how we are seeing it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Kirkpatrick, I know that your office has gotten a lot of attention recently, and of course, any new agency, there tends to be a push to increase size and funding. We want to make sure that you're able to meet your goals, but what I also need to ensure is that we're not duplicating or replicating existing functions and creating redundancy within DoD. and the interagency. So what steps are you taking right now to make sure that your particular office and function is unique to any of the other agencies that might be involved in these types of cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would like to lay down, here's what my, sort of my mission and my goal and my vision here. So the vision is at some point in the future, you should not need an arrow. If I'm successful in what I'm doing, we should be able to normalize everything that we're doing into existing processes, functions, agencies, and organizations, and make that part of their mission and their role. Right now, the niche that we form is really going after the unknowns. I think you articulated it early on, this is a hunt mission for what might somebody be doing in our backyard that we don't know about. All right, well, that is what we are doing, right? But at some point, we should be able to normalize that. That's why it's so important, the work we're doing with joint staff, to normalize that into DoD policy and guidance. We are bringing in all of our interagency partners. So NASA is providing a liaison for us. I have FBI liaison. I have OSI liaison. I have service liaisons. Half of my staff come from the IC. Half of my staff come from other scientific and technical backgrounds. I have DOE. And so what we're trying to do is ensure, again, as I make UAP into SEP, they get handed off to the people that is their mission to go do, so that we aren't duplicating that. I'm not going to go chase the Chinese high-altitude balloon, for example. That's not my job. It's not an unknown, and it's not anomalous anymore. Now it goes over to them. Right.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I wanted just to follow up on the filters for surveillance. Outside observers have speculated that DoD sets filters on certain sensors to eliminate objects that are moving really fast or slow, because what we are looking for militarily are conventional aircraft and missiles. UAP that doesn't fit into these programs would thereby be weeded out and never noticed. This speculation was proven to be true during the UAP incidents over North America, where DoD publicly acknowledged that we were able to start seeing these UAPs only when we opened up these filters. Obviously, our military operators cannot be overloaded with objects that are not conventional aircraft or missiles. Can you nonetheless make sure that the raw data is being captured and subsequently processed so that your office knows what's really out there? And is that going to cost money? Will you expect to pay for that money out of Aero's budget?
One of the key tenets that we're trying to do in our science plan is understand what those signatures are. So we get all the raw, for example, radar data prior to the scrubbing and filtering to allow it to enter into our weapons systems and our detection systems. We are now taking all that data and cross-correlating it to what pilots are saying they're seeing or other observations from other operators. What that allows us to do is then see if there are any signatures in that data that I can pull out, generate what we'll call automatic target recognition algorithms that allow us to then use that signature associated with a observed UAP, whatever that UAP may be. We will then make those recommendations of what those changes should be back to the department. So the Deputy Secretary had asked me last October to make those recommendations. What changes do we need to make to radars, to platforms, to detection systems and algorithms to pull on those algorithms and make those changes? That's going to take some time. That's where the research and development comes in, right? It's not instantaneous. Right now, a lot of the, I won't say, a lot of the things that fall outside of the ranges of those filters have been identified by people in the loop. And you can't have people in the loop all the time. It's just not cost effective. So part of our budget is working through what does that look like, and then making those recommendations back to the big program offices for them to put into changes in acquisition.
My last question is about the academic community. Can you give us an update on sort of how you collaborate with the academic community and whether how the independent study being done by NASA complements ARRO's work?
Sure. Two questions, so I'm going to try to make it quick. In 1979, Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I would go one step further, and I would say extraordinary claims require not only extraordinary evidence, but extraordinary science. And so how do you do that? You do that with the scientific method, right? And so as ARRO is developing and implementing its science plan, it has to do so grounded in a solid foundation of scientific theory across the entire range of hypotheses that have been presented for what UAP are. That range spans adversary breakthrough technology on one hand, known objects and phenomena in the middle, all the way to the extreme theories of extraterrestrials. All of that has physics-based signatures associated with it, whether it's theoretical from the academic community, known from things like hypersonic weapons, or adversary breakthrough technologies, as we've talked about before, or the known objects that we have to go measure. The idea is across that entire range, you have to come up with peer-reviewed scientific basis for all of it. The academic community plays a very big role on the one end of the spectrum, the intelligence community on the other end of the spectrum, and then measurement in the middle. Once I have those signatures identified in validated, peer-reviewed documents, then I have something to point to for all that data. Because all that data is going to match one of those signatures, right? And then I can go, well, it's that and not that, or it's that. And that helps us go through all that. Where NASA comes in and the study that they're doing, which I'm supporting, is really looking at the unclassified data sources that might be used to augment our classified data sources to understand if there's a signature there we can pull on. So very similar to the radars, but civil capabilities. So for example, we have a lot of climate science satellites, for example, that look at Earth. Lots of them. How many of those is the data valuable in seeing these kinds of objects? The challenge in that is those platforms don't necessarily have the resolution you need. So if you remember the slide I put up there with the trends, the size of the objects we're looking for are typically reported to be 1 to 4 meters. Well, the resolution of many of the climate science civil satellites is much larger than that, which means you'd have a hard time picking out something that's smaller than a pixel on the imagery on the data. That's not to say all of it's not useful, and there are ways of pulling through that data and going through. That is what NASA is focused on right now. So what are some other data sources that could be used? In addition, things like open source and crowdsourcing of data. We're exploring public-private partnerships, ma'am, as you know, we've talked about in the past, to look at, is there a way to smartly crowdsource additional data that might be useful to augment some of my classified sources? And what does that look like? And how would we do it so that we're not overwhelmed by, everybody who wants to take a picture of everything?
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the committee before we close? Or do you have another round? Yeah. Do you have anything else you'd like to tell the committee before we close?
Thank you very much for allowing us to come and share a little bit of insight into what ARRO is up to and what we're doing. I hope to be able to share a whole lot more in the future. We have a lot of work to do, so if you don't hear from me outside, it's because we've got a lot of work to do.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kirkpatrick. Thank you for the hearing.
Thank you.
Bueno, pues no decepcionó, realmente extraordinaria presentación por Sean Kirkpatrick y las senadoras encabezadas por Kirsten Gillibrand. La explicación pues realmente nos dejó saber mucho de lo que está investigando AARO, los métodos que está siguiendo. Incluso se presentaron 2 videos, uno que no tiene explicación, de hecho fueron 3 videos, uno que no tiene ninguna explicación, otro que pues tampoco tiene una explicación, pero no ha sido todavía descartado que se le va a poder dar una explicación, y otro que sí tenía. Entonces, finalmente se presentó alguna evidencia. De acuerdo a Kirkpatrick, hay ya 20 o 30 casos que van a presentar que aparentemente están concluidos y no tienen una explicación, y estos podrían ser presentados, si no me equivoco, en junio o julio, y pues vamos a estar muy pendientes si esto ocurre. Y nos explicó también los diferentes sistemas, ¿no? Cómo la comunidad científica y la comunidad de inteligencia están participando. Son 2 áreas de AARO. La comunidad de inteligencia está más preocupada en todo lo que puede ser identificado como pues armas, o que pueden ser desarrollados como o considerados como
amenazas.
¿Perdón?
Amenazas.
Amenazas, es correcta la palabra, como amenazas, mientras que del lado de los científicos, pues todo aquel que no tiene explicación y que pueda acercarse más a la teoría extraterrestre. Dijo que hasta el momento no hay ninguna evidencia que demuestre la presencia o la existencia de seres extraterrestres. Y bueno, dijo muchísimas cosas. Fue una conferencia muy rica en información. Nosotros ahorita vamos a trabajar duro para tenerla a las 2 de la tarde. Si por alguna razón no la tenemos a las 2, bueno, será un poco después, porque usted se dará cuenta que es mucho el trabajo que hay que realizar, y lo vamos a hacer, porque esta es sin duda alguna histórica, Rubén.
Yo diría que la mejor hasta el momento, porque nos permitió asomarnos un poco más a cómo está trabajando esta oficina AARO, encabezada precisamente por el señor Kirkpatrick, que nos revela cuál es su metodología, la tabla que presentó de cómo se clasifican estos objetos de acuerdo a su altitud, color, tamaño, distancia. También resultó interesante, de tal manera que, como tú señalas, Jaime, la podemos considerar como la mejor audiencia hasta ahorita. Si bien es cierto, todavía hay la resistencia a aceptar el fenómeno extraterrestre, pero lo importante es que se está mencionando y se está trabajando en ello, ¿no?
Pues sí, creo que seguramente vamos a tener el especial de este fin de semana en Tercer Milenio por 7.2 en Televisión Azteca en México, en televisión abierta, y también vamos a tener pues seguramente información esta misma noche en el noticiero que presentamos en YouTube, que se llama Tercer Milenio 360 Internacional. Vamos a sacar solamente pues algunas de las cosas que se dijeron, fueron muchas, créame, ni siquiera el domingo lo vamos a alcanzar a cubrir todo, y esto que pues hay un espacio mayor como de 20 minutos que se da a este segmento del programa, y pues vamos a tratar de incluir toda la información, porque sí fue mucha, pero muy interesante, ¿no? Creo que se va a hablar mucho de lo que ocurrió hoy aquí. Los medios de información van a presentar todas estas cosas. Seguramente esta noche todo el mundo va a estar hablando del tema, y nuevamente se va a volver a calentar de una manera muy importante. Si es que pues hay que estar muy pendientes, y hay que volver a ver esta presentación a las 2 de la tarde ya en español, o puede ser a las 3 o 2:30, no sé, ténganos paciencia. Vamos a hacer lo mejor que podamos, pero pues sí hay que verla y hay que digerirla, porque es mucha información la que se dio hoy aquí, pero ya nos dejó ver, como dice Rubén, hacia el interior de cómo funciona AARO, y pues da la confianza de que están haciendo un buen trabajo.
Así es.
De que es muy minucioso.
Así es, y bueno, vamos a ver en próximas audiencias qué más material presenta Sean Kirkpatrick, porque me gustó su postura.
Al final dijo, no es la última vez que me van a ver, estamos trabajando duro, seguramente va a haber más información, y yo espero que esto nos conduzca finalmente a la aceptación de que no estamos solos. También habló de que pues la decisión de dar esta información era de la Casa Blanca, no de él. Él produce la información y la responsabilidad es de alguien más, en este caso el presidente Biden, y yo espero que con la información que se le proporcione y todo, pues da la autorización para que ya se vaya más allá en este tema y se reconozca esto, que no estamos solos. Pero yo le vuelvo a decir, lo que no creo que vaya a ocurrir, y el mayor temor que tiene el Pentágono, es que nos vayamos hacia atrás para poder saber que hace más de 76, 77 años, ellos saben que hay extraterrestres porque recuperaron naves, porque recuperaron cuerpos. Nada de esto se habló. También se habló muy poco de los objetos. Sí se mencionaron los objetos del 10, 11 y 12 de febrero. Se habló del objeto del 4, que él dice, ese no es de mi interés porque pues ya sabemos qué es, ahí no está mi interés. Y de los otros no habló más. No nos dijo qué eran. Lo que sí quedó claro también, que se mencionó, es que cuando se abrieron ciertos filtros, inmediatamente aparecieron todos esos objetos, y son tantos terrestres o extraterrestres, que los volvieron a cerrar porque era abrumador lo que estaban viendo y no podían responder como lo hicieron el 10, 11 y 12 de febrero a cada uno de estos avistamientos que se estaba dando. Y pues queda claro que ahí es donde están estos objetos. También dijo Kirkpatrick que la mayoría de los que ellos ven miden entre 1 y 4 metros. Yo creo que hay objetos más grandes de lo que a lo mejor no quiere hablar, pero pues nosotros tenemos presentado los videos auténticos, videos grabados por muchos testigos y que no tienen una explicación. O sea, sí, pero todavía no llegan tan lejos como a veces llegamos los investigadores del fenómeno, a lo mejor equivocados, a lo mejor diciendo la verdad, pero llegamos mucho más lejos de lo que llegan estos científicos. Tienen que ser muy cuidadosos en lo que dicen, en lo que investigan, porque hay muchos intereses de tipo político y militar involucrados, y eso siempre va a afectar este fenómeno. Pero se están dando pasos firmes hacia adelante. Yo creo que hoy es más positivo que negativo lo de hoy, mucho más que en la sesión anterior. La sesión anterior pues simplemente quisieron vernos la cara, los dos personajes que fueron del Pentágono. Ahora al menos creo que respondió las preguntas, creo que fue honesto, quizá no dijo todo lo que sabe, pero lo que dijo era correcto, era verdad.
Así es, como tú mencionas, estos personajes se manejan de manera muy prudente, cuidan mucho sus palabras precisamente para no precipitar conclusiones, pero aquí lo importante cuando iniciamos esta transmisión, Jaime, esto todavía atrás del año 2017 era impensable. Que ocurrieran este tipo de audiencias, este tipo de transmisiones, era impensable, todavía en el año 2016.
Que se estén haciendo esas investigaciones.
Así es, que bueno, parecía tema de ciencia ficción.
Bueno, nosotros aquí cerramos esta transmisión, seguramente pues regresaremos a las 2 de la tarde para presentar lo que se va a dar ahí en español, y en la noche tendremos pues algunas de las partes más destacadas de esta conferencia. Y el domingo mucho más amplio en Tercer Milenio, ya sabe, es el medio que está realmente, creo que uno de los pocos en habla hispana que está haciendo esto, para que usted esté bien informado. Y también por Twitter le vamos a dar información, y por las diferentes redes sociales. Muchísimas gracias por habernos atendido. Empezó un poco tarde, pero fue muy buena, ¿no lo cree? Gracias, Rubén.
Buen día, hasta luego.
Hasta pronto.
Ante la intensa actividad del fenómeno extraterrestre que se está dando en la Tierra, ante los extraordinarios cambios en las altas esferas del gobierno, ante los hechos misteriosos que no nos quieren revelar, lo invito este sábado 6 de mayo a las 7 de la noche a The Grand Theater en Anaheim, California. No lo olvide, no humanos, las evidencias.